Mr. Speaker, it is scandalous how today's NDP continue to break their promise to spend all of the money from the increase in the PST from 7 to 8% on core infrastructure. In the first year, the dollars spent on infrastructure were $75 million less than were raised by the increase in the PST. In the second year, the total had risen to $79 million. Furthermore, millions of dollars were spent elsewhere than on infrastructure because much of the money spent on infrastructure was borrowed money. Why does the Premier continue to break one of the core promises with this shell game?
Mr. Speaker, when we introduced our 5-year infrastructure program, we said if there was any money that was left over from one year, it would be rolled over and invested in the next year. I can report to the House that the infrastructure investments this year are off to a very strong start. We're ahead of schedule on what was proposed to be done this year in terms of infrastructure investments for roads, sewer and water, strategic infrastructure, other core pieces of infrastructure which will make the Manitoba economy strong now and ensure that it will be even more effective and efficient going forward. So if there's any resources left over, we roll them over. And when we have a good season, we get up and we add even more to the budget to make sure that infrastructure investments continue to move Manitoba forward with good quality infrastructure, with good job opportunities for young people, Mr. Speaker, a vision that this side of the House supports. Members opposite have voted against it. They said they would slash that program. I'm only sorry the member from River Heights has voted against the budget, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, but the Premier didn't roll the money over. He spent it on other items the last 2 years.
Good point.
Mr. Speaker, it is scandalous that there are more than 10,000 children in the care of Manitoba's Child and Family Services.
What an understatement.
Indeed, it is horrifying that some of these children in CFS care, for whom today's NDP government is the guardian, are to be found in very unsafe places, including in the sex trade and in crack houses. I asked the Premier, why has his government been such a rotten parent for 16 years?
Mr. Speaker, the number of children in care is far larger than anybody in this House would wish to see, Mr. Speaker. We want safe children home with their families in their communities, Mr. Speaker. And we work closely with First Nations communities, Métis communities, Inuit communities, all the Indigenous people of Manitoba, and all Manitobans who have children in care, because there are others, to ensure that we find safe alternatives for them, Mr. Speaker. And we will continue to do that. We're investing in prevention. We're investing in higher standards for the qualifications and training of people. We've brought in human trafficking legislation in Manitoba. We've put in places programs like Tracia's Trust to invest in programs that will reach out and find children that are disconnected from their homes and their communities and help them come back to a safe place, a safe haven. And that will be our continuing objective as we do that. One of the things we continue to pursue is the path of reconciliation with communities. And the path of reconciliation at the end of the day means safe children with safe families and safe communities and a sense of who they are and their own identity. And we will continue to pursue that in this House as we bring forward more initiatives in the future, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, it is scandalous that today's NDP government has had not just one huge untendered contract like STARS, but so many more, including, of course, not soliciting bids for the privatization of Manitoba's property registry. Now, the Premier and one of his senior ministers have been exposed as promoting an untendered contract for Tiger Dams. And the Tiger Dam and Terranet affairs are associated with clear and very serious conflicts of interest. Why is the Premier so unconcerned about cost and quality that he would abuse public processes and the trust of Manitobans in this way?
Mr. Speaker, we are the government that brought forward strengthening the amendments to the Auditor General's Act to give them more powers, not only to do typical attest audits, but to do value for the money audits, to take a look at whether we're getting good value for the programs. And when they bring forward a report, we take those reports seriously, and we have, even in our bits of legislation, before the legislature right now, improvements on reporting and transparency with respect to tender contracts in Manitoba, and measures will be taken to strengthen those procedures. There are circumstances when contracts are sole sourced, such as when there's no other supplier, which is why we sole sourced the STARS helicopter program. There was no other provider ready and able to provide that service in a timely fashion, in a continuous practice, in a continuous fashion to the people of Manitoba. We put the public interest first, Mr. Speaker, and when we put the public interest first, we bring services into play when people need them, where they need them, for the crucial disaster situations that they are facing. We make no apologies for that, Mr. Speaker. Members opposite need to explain why they wouldn't provide those services when people are facing life and death situations.